folks, this is Reed from Power Negotiating, and today I'd like to talk about lease options and the types of lease option properties not to buy. And you say, Reed, I thought you could do lease options with every type of property. Well, you can if you have a hankering for negative cash flow. I don't really want to have negative cash flow. Here are the things I'm looking for. I'm looking for a lease option property. Number one, it has to be a property that doesn't need any type of repairs. When I say no repairs, mowing the yard, that's acceptable. Doing a little bit of light trimming on the trees, I can handle that. Maybe a little bit of paint, I can do that. If it's more than $1,000, I'm out of there. Why? Because I'm not going to get that money back immediately. These properties had to be in great shape. Number two, I'm looking for properties that are bread and butter properties. I'm not looking for properties that are $300,000 or $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $1 million properties unless I can rent those out and have positive cash flow. Well, typically on upper end properties, the mortgage payments are higher than the rent, and so what you're going to find is you're going to have a negative cash flow on those properties. Can you have negative cash flow? Yes, you can, but you have to be willing to really examine this, and you have to have the cash readily available for this. The only way I would take a property with a negative cash flow is if I had enough equity in the property to make it worthwhile. What's enough equity? Maybe $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 in equity. And if I was comfortable with the negative cash flow because it was so small that I could go ahead and subsidize that, but I don't really want to have negative cash flow for too long. Just a thought. Next thing I'm looking for in a property is I want to have a property that is not a condo. And you can say, Reed, why don't I want condos? Condos, those should be perfect. It depends on your market, but typically condos have homeowners associations. And a lot of times those homeowners association fees, there's nobody that is keeping track of those, and so your homeowners association fees are out of control. So you always want to check the HOA fees, and typically those are going to be negative cash flow. You keep on saying, Reed, you keep on coming back to negative cash flow. Why can't I have negative cash flow? It's money out of pocket. You don't want that. So I'm looking, if it's a condo, I want to be very careful. Now there is something that is sort of intriguing. A couple of years back, people were selling these condo hotels down near Disney, and they were giving people positive cash flow for the first year just to get them into the property. And then what would happen is a second mortgage would come into place, and they'd be upside down maybe $200 or $300, $500, $1,000 a month. These things were just terrible alligators, and buyers would get into these and it would look good for the first year, and then they would go crazy. What other type of properties am I not looking for lease options? I'm not looking for unique properties. A unique property is something that's a 1 in a million type of property. Let me give you an example. My parents years ago built an earth-sheltered home. It was about 3,300 square feet, and it had over 200 cubic yards of concrete in it. Had 3 feet of dirt on the roof. I used to go ahead and mow the roof for them sometimes. It was really weird. People would drive by and they'd see a lawnmower on the roof. Sort of strange. The only thing is, it was a unique property, which meant that not a whole lot of buyers were interested in it. Why are you interested in regular properties? If you have a regular property, anybody's going to be interested in it. If you have a 1 in a million property, you're going to have one buyer in a million that's interested in that property, which isn't bad if you have that buyer. If you don't, it can be a long wait. I had an occasion out in Colorado Springs where we had some people that wanted to sell a property that was in an airport park, which meant that people go ahead and fly their airplane in, and they would land it on this landing strip, and then they would taxi it around to their garage, which held their plane. And it was great if you had a community full of flyers. What happens if you're trying to sell a house there and you didn't have a whole community full of flyers? If you put a restriction on the type of buyers that you have, you're going to have fewer buyers. So always be aware that if you have something that, because of its location, because of the expense, because of the type of house, because of the amenities, it limits the number of people that are going to want it, maybe that's not the type of house for you. We were talking about negative cash flow before. Let's talk about ways to offset that. Four, three, two, one. We're talking about negative cash flow. One of the ways to offset negative cash flow is a little thing that is sort of fun. Let's assume that we have a $100,000 house, and let's assume that the rent on this, just for simplicity's sake, is $1,000 a month. So you have a positive cash flow in that property. What happens if the rent on that was $800 a month, and with the mortgage, the taxes, and insurance, it all came up to maybe $850, which is just barely negative cash flow? How would you handle that? Here's the solution. You find a tenant buyer, and you say, Reed, what exactly is a tenant buyer? A tenant buyer, as we mentioned before, is a tenant that wants to buy the property, but for some reason, whether they just had a bankruptcy, they just got foreclosed on, something happened to their credit, they had a little hiccup in their credit, and they can't purchase a property right now, but they can in 2 years. The first thing I would do is I would find out if they qualify in 2 years, if they do everything that they should. If they can't qualify in 2 years, next. But if they can qualify in 2 years, you move on to the next step. You find out what type of non-refundable option fee they have for down payment. If they have $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 for a non-refundable option fee, now we can talk to them. What I'm looking for is someone that is willing to put down the non-refundable option fee, which shall be converted to a down payment if they execute, and they're looking to get into the property. And then I ask them the question, I am going to do a special deal for you. This is going to be a forced savings plan to help you do even better in this property as far as getting it. Here's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to give you a 2-for-1 discount, which means that the rent right now is, let's say it's $800. The rent right now is $800 a month. If you'll pay an extra $200 a month towards your non-refundable option fee, which shall be converted to a down payment, I'll give you $200 credit towards the non-refundable option fee, and I'll discount the price of the house $200. So for every $200 you give me, you get $400 back. 2-for-1. How can you beat that? Now, why do I do this? Number one, it helps my positive cash flow. I'd rather have money now than money later. And also, I'm not losing money. Let's assume this $100,000 property is worth $100,000, but we bought it for $85,000, and we're going to sell it $100,000 for what it will be worth 2 years from now. So we use 5% annual appreciation, so $105,000 for the first year, $110,000, $111,000 for the second year. So we had this contracted at $111,000. We bought it for $85,000, or we have it under contract for $85,000 on a lease option, which means that when we sell it to them for 2 years from now, the difference between let's say $110,000 and $85,000 is $25,000. Would I gladly give up $4,800, which is $200 a month times 2 years? Would I gladly give up $4,800 in the price if I have positive cash flow and if I have a contract where I get $25,000 in profit 2 years from now? Absolutely. I'm interested in, do I have positive cash flow right now?